So just like wrapping up everything that's been said, in your minds, like what is some ways that we can continue to grow the infrastructure in the local scene here around music, and what can we do to attract more external organizational eyes and talent to come here?
I mean, from my experience, because I've only been here for just over 2 years, and it took me a while to kind of figure out what was going on and even hear about the companies and the resources without doing my own research. So I think from that perspective, I'd just like to hear everyone be a bit more loud, to be honest, about what they're doing. Like talk about your achievements and like how you're trying to help. And from having those conversations with other people, you'll be able to grow your own kind of organization and see who can help you, and likewise, like how you can help them. So I think it's just about being more proud of the work that you're doing and having those conversations with people, and not just going to a party for the sake of having, like, just, having fun or whatever. And I mean, obviously still do that, but
well, don't do that right now.
Yeah, not right now, for sure.
Don't go to parties, everybody.
Yeah, but yeah, just kind of like having that voice and sharing it. I think a lot of it comes down to sharing what you're doing.
I think that just continuing to elevate what we do, it'll be important to have people from other markets coming here to work here. And I know that Music BC and Creative BC, for example, before this, one of the grant programs that I thought was really cool that I was surprised more people didn't take up on was a grant to have people from other markets come work with BC producers and BC studios. And I'm surprised people weren't all over that. Because if there was an artist from New York that, if you're a producer that you can say, hey, I can get 50% of your travel costs here, 50% of your studio costs covered if you want to come do an album with me. That plus the exchange rate, they're getting a project for about 30% of market value. That's just one example of, I think, smart initiatives to try and get other markets working here, because I actually do think that's really important. I think I would like to see local artists working more with Toronto artists, with artists, American artists especially. Breaking into the American scene is the hardest part about being a Canadian artist. And I know artists that do really well in Canada that can fill, 600-800 people across the country easy. But the second they head to Chicago, it's brick. So I think we would be well served to try and build more with American artists and producers and other stuff like that.
Like, we don't need to sit around and wait for somebody else to give us a $10,000 check, $20,000 check to do something, right? You gotta either fund it yourself or get it back in the back end, right? You just gotta put in that time and investment yourself. And I think the bigger thing is there's still this fantasy that so many artists here have of like, oh man, I want to get a deal with Sony or Universal, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's times where you don't really need it anymore, depending on what you want to do. Like, I know there's artists here, especially after I guess it's fine, a conversation with from UMG in New York, and he's like, shit, I thought Vancouver was all like white rockers, right? So I think even the perception is still there for us to change, especially when you're talking about like hip hop, R&B, and new age pop, because the second part to that / to play devil's advocate is that the last 4 artists who got signed here, one, they were all white. Last one was a country artist. Before that was a pop artist who does work with a lot of local acts. One who signed off of TikTok. And then the one before that was, I forget the fourth one, my apologies. But those are your examples, right? It's people who have a lot of traction that those labels can churn out quickly. Mm-hmm. Which maybe doesn't benefit the artist as much as they think it does.
I think the infrastructure is going to grow. I think that it's growing slowly and slowly. It's going to take, some outside eyes and perspective. But I think the biggest component is going to be the people that are here on the ground, building it, investing in it, scaling it. And I think that should be the focus. I think that's the thing that's been lacking the most in the industry historically, at least from my perspective. And was the main reason we started Chaos Club, the lack of infrastructure.
Yeah, we need more Chaos Clubs for sure.
For sure. And I encourage it 100%.
Well, yeah, when Universal and Warner and those record label and publishing companies were here, there's more happening. Obviously, the rock, indie, pop scene was booming. At the same time, hip hop is doing its thing too with the Swollen members, the Rascals. There's a little bit more, activity here in Vancouver. And then we talked about kind of that gap. I think right now we're trending upwards, and we're starting to see other genres start to like really get big, and the artists within it are starting to gain some like global recognition. So I think naturally we're going to see those record labels and publishing companies come back to Vancouver. I think I already mentioned it, but it's one of my long-term goals is to make it big enough where people will want to be here. But that starts with the artists and it starts with the music. Just like from the ground up, you need to plant the seed and watch it grow. It's going to take a bit of time, but eventually we'll get there because we have the talent, you know what I mean? And we're already seeing artists blow up like globally. And then as that's continuing to happen, we're going to start to get more global recognition. So just be patient and keep putting in that work and collaborating with one another and uplifting each other, and our scene's going to go crazy. Like, I think we already know that it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. So.
Now, I was going to say real talk. We have a stash problem here, especially in our hip hop / R&B / pop community. There's so much sitting in the bank for so many artists in the city. It's just like, I think they have a fear.
Yeah, time to get it out.
Right? But no, it's funny because I feel like on that note, like you said, now that there is this newfound like exponential growth happening in the city, it's really been happening by like, to put simply, like artists are realizing you grow by not looking around you, but looking forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's no point in seeing what's happened before, what's maybe buzzing right now. It's where do I go from here and how do I keep pushing forward in that direction?
I've been doing two types of things. So one is the studio sessions where I bring in different collaborators who have never worked with each other, and they have a studio session. Even if they don't come out with a song, it's a dope because you're collaborating with another person that you've never worked with. It's good for skill set to try different things, but also like networking. It's good to like meet the people, right? On top of that, I do those workshops, the royalty workshops, we call them SoCan 101. So that's more like business stuff. That's just like education. So it's cool to have like the creative stuff and also the education. I'm trying to like really go hard on both ends to like do what I can for our city and our province.
I just want to be the devil's advocate for a second. We just had a conversation about if you want to make a change, why not be that change? As long as the narrative is us and them, we're still stuck in some kind of mentality that we are reliant on them.
By having that attention back on Vancouver, even if it wasn't a label, let's say it was the equivalent Blueprint in Toronto paying attention to us, that means there's something more of value here that people are now paying attention to. And because we're in a place where we don't need to go to a label anymore to capitalize on that value, that means we're continuing to grow as a scene. So how can we continue to grow? Like the guys from Chaos Club, Buck, unfortunately couldn't be here, are trying to be their own idea of infrastructure and building out a full house of like visual team, film team, etc. How do we do more of that?
And they're based here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're doing it.
Yeah.
And they are being that change.
I think maybe the reason left is a good thing is because we don't need them, and they realize that, like we don't need Universal Music to have a headquarters here.
So yeah, just thinking about even festivals and like bigger shows. Like I noticed that Toronto, they get like most of the big artists, they want to go to Toronto first. They skip over Vancouver, so sometimes we're forgotten about. It's like talking about the record labels and all that. I'm not sure what it is, but like we do have like we get missed on some of the tour dates. I don't know why that is 100%, but yeah, definitely like keeping consistent and showing what we have. We'll always people will be looking at Vancouver as a stop to go to. I know like Snoop Dogg likes to stop in Vancouver a lot. He's always chilling out here, But I guess I don't know if it's with the border crossing coming up from Seattle or wherever. It's harder to get here. Yeah, and I noticed that like some tours don't make it this way. So just seeing how to expand that would be dope also to make the hub bigger.
I think our concept of infrastructure is like a blank canvas right now. We're in a microtransactional economy. We're in a borderless microtransactional world. that doesn't rely on monolithic society. And we're just coming to terms with that, I think. And, you know, the generation that I grew up in was still very complicit, pandering, subservient. You know, I grew up in a number of colonized states and am half white and Chinese and Nepalese on the other side. I'm very much a mixed race product of colonization in some ways. And we have to question what that infrastructure could look like, I think, before we even try to build it. Because otherwise we're grasping at previous frameworks that I don't think are built on foundations I want to stand by.
Stand on, right, that's great. Yeah.
And that's a difficult conversation, but actually that's why I was so grateful to be here, because this is what we need to say. We have to ask, what do you think, SJ? What do you think the answer is?
To break it down even more, I think, because the reason I personally wanted to dive into that question more was, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's artists who don't know what to do outside of making music. Mm-hmm. So we can show them, hey, if you work with these guys who are from Vancouver, mm-hmm. they can help you but guide you in certain directions or give you support in needs that you might not know how to approach otherwise. For example, how do I go make a music video? Yeah. Like, there's so much involved with that people really have no idea of how to approach it. Mm-hmm. So expanding that where people have a wider breadth of resources to knowingly go to versus like talking to all your homies, as much as that still works. Yeah. It'd be nice to formalize that idea of reaching out to your network, as much as I hate that term, and being like, hey, I want to get this project done. Who should I contact and where should I go? Yeah. How do I promote it? How do I fund it? Okay. Right? Putting the entire onus on an artist isn't doing them a disservice, but it does take away from them spending more time making music. So to minimize that as much as we can is my idea of increasing infrastructure in Vancouver, mm-hmm. where you now have a track that's turning into a railway, basically, where once you're on it, you know where to go, where it's going, mm-hmm. and what stops will be there along the way until you get there.
So let me ask you a question. How many of the people that you know are members of Music BC?
Personally, it's lower because there's a lot of organizations who actually don't know they actually apply for Music BC membership. So there's actually that. But artist-wise, it's a pretty good percentage, actually. Probably like 60, 70, maybe 75 even. But yeah.
How about you? Are you a member of Music BC?
No. Actually, I don't know.
You have to sign up. That's something else.
I'm pretty sure I should be.
This is most of the time what people say. So I respectfully, and I'm of course biased, especially as a representative of the local music industry association whose job it is to empower people to have those resources. If most people are giving me a question of, I don't know where to go, but they haven't gone to any of the major bodies that could answer any of their questions, it's a problem. It's a problem on both sides. Now, I'm not saying that it's the artist's fault in any way. It's our responsibility as Music BC to also provide you with the information to show you that it's really important. But it takes two sides to come together to understand the value of each other. And I think that's the bigger question, is when you say, what infrastructure can we build? Not enough people are saying what infrastructure exists. And then if that infrastructure is not working for you, you need to speak to the people who can help you change. We just had our board, our annual general meeting, and we need to be more engaged. And I try so hard not to be that yelly person that says, get engaged and be the difference. But there is a point where I have to tell you what the opportunity cost is of you saying, not you, these are just questions we're talking about, but of a person saying, I don't know where to go without having even tried. And I don't know who to ask without even having asked. Because that, to me, is just lazy. And if you want to be a successful person, I'm sorry, Don't be lazy about that.
You gotta put in the work at the end of the day, right? That's what it is.
Show up.
Right?
Show up.
Well, I'm actually curious. This is actually me personally asking. In terms of like the example of not music video funding, but like production, like what questions could I answer from Music BC in that regard?
What questions could you ask Music BC?
Yeah, of like music video production, because that's something I wasn't aware of.
Well,
like the funding I'm aware of, but not like...
Okay, but if you were, let's say you pick up the phone, you call Kentia, who's works at Music BC, and you say, I'm not a member right now, I've got to produce a music video, I think this is going to be the best thing to do. Kentia does her job very well, the whole team there do their job very well. They are going to figure out if that's, one, really what you need to do, two, some people that they can point you in the direction of, three, resources that you can look at. Like, for example, when COVID hit, we had a how-to series, 5 weeks of how to set yourself up, how to stream online, how to do all of these things that you can go to immediately to help yourself. It's not Music BC's job or anybody's job, for example, like for that matter, to feed you money and feed you opportunities.
But that's why I wanted to clarify specifically.
Okay.
It's not about the funding. It's like purely, like let's say they didn't want to ask a question about funding. They're a fresh artist who maybe dropped their first 5. Like they have a decent following. They actually have traction on the music, but they've never made a video, for example.
Yeah.
Just to continue on that example. And they're like, hey, I want to go hire a director, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't have enough of a network / friends to reach out to.
Yeah.
Hey, can you guys help me out? Like, what would be the average / like ideal /
What would be the type of response?
Exactly.
Well, it would be like anyone getting in touch with me. I'd be like, I don't know how to direct a music video, but I know someone who does. I'm going to send you that way and let you find out whether they can help you. And if they can't, if they're a good person, and let's look at who's around the table, every single person here is here to elevate the music industry. So everyone in that industry association on that team is there to help you however they can. They might not have the answer for you, but if you call them, they'll try. And this is why I say it's a two-way street, because it's Music BC's job to go and find out, and the reason I'm sitting here right now is because you reached out to us, right? Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just checking. I just turned off. I just walked by and was like, this looks fun. But you reached out to us. It's now our responsibility to honor that. But it's also our responsibility to reach out to you afterwards and say, hey, can we do things together? That's how you centralize. That's how you you stop perpetuating the fracture, which is the thing that both of you have spoken about before. And I love the idea of that not existing. We don't need to live in silos. We need to celebrate the diversity that we have, but we need to centralize somehow.
100%, yeah.
And I think we need to do that. Music BC happens to be the provincial industry association. Creative BC is also a great resource. Factor is also a great resource. But Neha and I have been here for a few years, and we probably know more people in the music industry than a lot of other people do, simply because we picked up the phone and asked. So again, it comes back to show up, provide value, what you said, and I loved how you said it actually, present the value rather than yourself. Present your value. And we need to understand with all these elections, all this societal change, that this is a together thing. This is not a how can you help me? This is a how can we do this? And I think that's what needs to be the narrative.
And I would just encourage people to utilize all forms of, leverage that they can. We're so lucky here with the Creative VC program. Shout out to Lisa Baer, the Minister of Culture and Arts, and other people in those organizations like Brenda and stuff at Creative VC that work so hard and give us opportunities that they would literally kill for in the States, for example. So if you're able to receive funding to start initiatives, to start a label, to build a studio, to develop your career as an artist, that's already such like a powerful form of leverage that we have here. So I would encourage everyone to utilize resources such as that to start building their infrastructure, because it's an opportunity that most markets do not have. And it almost sounds too good to be true, but it is true, and you can use it. And as long as you put in the work and write up a proper grant application, you can get that money.
The last sentence there is the problem that so many artists have. I think they're really afraid of writing grants because the minute they get rejection, they just lose so much of the energy and realizing, oh, I spent all this time writing a grant. I understand, but if you talk to people like Francis, Brenda, people like that, like, just apply again.
Yeah, we had to do that for our studio build. We applied first time, didn't get it. Applied second time, we got it.
Like, that's what I'm saying. It's really just the persistence, because I understand it is a solid amount of time investment sometimes for some of these grants. Like, some of them are 3-4 pages long, but like, you got to spend the time. It's not, again, going back to what we said at the beginning, it's not just making good music. There's so much more involved that you need to do. Right?
Well, and you have to have your ducks in a row from a business standpoint. Like, a lot of artists will be like, oh, are you going to apply? And they're like, oh, I haven't filed my taxes for 5 years, so I can't, or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe you should figure that out. So there are some barriers to entry, but get your business in order because it pays dividends across the board.
Yeah, I mean, Monstercat only has an infrastructure now because we built a strong foundation. So, I mean, from hearing everything that we've just talked about for the past 10 minutes, I feel like it's not a matter of, building an infrastructure, but building a foundation. I don't feel like there is a solid foundation yet for how information honestly is being disseminated between artists, organizations, and like Christina said, it's on both parties to want to find that out and help each other. Monstercat has a infrastructure, but we got there by having these types of conversations when they first started and reaching out to the people that they needed to help them kind of go in the right direction.
Yeah, they reached out to the place that I used to work at. Yeah. Just cold called and went, we're a local label. And we were like, okay. And they were like, do you want to have lunch? And we're like, okay.
Yeah, they were originally based in Waterloo, Ontario, and they moved here. So they moved to an area that's further away from the established industry within Canada, and they built it from here. But they didn't do that without having those conversations with every other person that would take the time to speak with them. So I think,
didn't even know that.
Yeah, so I think it really boils down to having information being disseminated well between organizations and individuals who are hungry enough to take that step and find out more.
I love that. Build a foundation. Yeah. Let's build a foundation.
Okay, quickly before we end, I just want to end with this quote because I think it sums up perfectly exactly what you're saying. It speaks about the advanced culture cluster, because I feel like that's exactly what we're talking about right now in this moment. So Professor Sacco in the research essay says, integration between entrepreneurs, collectives, and big name firms, companies, creating an advanced culture cluster characterized by an industrial atmosphere strongly oriented toward the production, absorption, consolidation, dissemination, like you said, of new thoughts and tech by an ethics of competence, competition, and risk, but also a strong sensitivity towards social inclusion. So I feel like if there's some way to, by bridging the gap between both sides coming together to work together, I feel like creating that, like he says, the advanced culture cluster, I feel like creating that and then finding ways to help, in your example, help the artists that are asking those questions. I feel like even this conversation and everything that's been said, I feel like creating some sort of advanced culture cluster, whatever that looks like, I feel like that's a perfect way to move forward with.
It's a great foundation.
That's a good point. I think it ties perfectly into the next audience question here. I believe her name is Savannah. Her question is, Vancouver has so much talent, yet there seems to be a glass ceiling. What do you think about this, and what do you see about being the contributing factors?
There is no glass ceiling. I don't see any glass ceiling. I don't agree with that statement.
A glass, what does glass ceiling mean exactly? What does it mean?
I guess
they just mean a ceiling, just mean that they can only go to a certain level is what she's trying to say. But she just doesn't know that there's a couple artists right now that I don't know where is the ceiling, what's she talking about, because maybe no money just went gold in the US. Yeah. So is that the ceiling? Insane. If that's the ceiling, I'm cool with getting gold plaques. I don't mind if that's the ceiling. He's doing world tours and selling out every single show, selling out merch. So if that's the ceiling, I'm cool with that ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, people forget like Vancouver is like a major fucking city. Like you have a lot to work with. You know, like if you're living like farther out in like Nelson and like stuff like that, or you're in some of these places in the U.S. that aren't like LA, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, like a main hub. Like Vancouver is like a major city of Canada. So like I feel like other cities have like way bigger disadvantages, but I don't think there's not really a ceiling, so to say, in a major market like Vancouver. Anyone can kind of make here, especially, and we spoke on it, like the new ways you can kind of promote yourself online and globally, like your location matters a lot less. So definitely agree with Johnny.
Yeah, no, I'd say the same thing. I agree with both of you. I'd say it's not that there's a ceiling. There's maybe more barriers because there's a lot of infrastructure here.
Yeah.
That's maybe the big difference. And obviously, like with the things with technology and other things, that we've slowly been able to erode those barriers. So it's just a matter of time. Like, it's going to get better and better as we go forward. That's the simplest way I can put it.
No, like I don't think, exactly to what's been said. I don't think that there's a ceiling, and like even for me, it's dope when I get to play like the music that I'm fucking with from Vancouver. Like that to me is dope, and I can see the trajectory. Like even some of my favorite artists out of Vancouver, like I get hyped when they drop new songs or new projects or whatever. Because to me, it's like the same feeling as when like a big name artist drops. Like I'm anticipating the drop because I know that it's going to be like quality content coming out of Vancouver. So like for me, like yeah, exactly to what has been said. Like I don't really see the ceiling. I'm just excited for the music, really. But so speaking of things that are outside of Vancouver, in this sense for this question, so talent in Canada seemingly always seems to make it out on their own. If we take the examples of like a Weeknd or a Drake, and why do you think that people in Vancouver try to emulate that model? And do you think that it is a good model to emulate, or should there be more collaboration and a coming together and working together?
Well, wouldn't that model imply like needing to work together?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's why I proposed the question. Like, you think that it is a good model when like the example of being Drake or like a Weeknd when they're blowing up and it seems to be done all by themselves, I guess, but with their team, but like all by themselves and not really picking up anybody else from the city? Or do you think that the idea of collaborating and having multiple people who are all on a consistent level blowing up at the same time, like what is the better model, I guess?
Well, I would wager to say that we're only looking at the end result, so we don't know that there wasn't a lot of scaffolding and team building before that happened. All we're seeing is that one person rise. So I'm not sure it's fair to say that it was that was a system based on not supporting or one person's effort. So it would be hard to say as a general rule. I would wager that in the building process there was a lot of collaboration and a lot of helping each other. I can't say for sure, but you can only assume, right? So all we're seeing there is the end result.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, for sure. I think I agree with Jamie Witz. I think in retrospect, we kind of look at the end goal and it's easy for us to come up with the narrative of how that happened because there's so many gaps that are left that we just kind of fill in the gaps with the simplest thing that we can think of. But I don't think anything can happen in isolation. Like the first time I heard of Drake was on a song he was featured on by, I think the artist's name was Paige or something like that. And it was a remix, right? I haven't heard anything from the main artist in a while, but I think that just kind of goes to show that there were people in the scene in Toronto that had enough of a buzz. And then I heard Drake featured on. That's the first time I ever heard Drake. And then to kind of see what he's done. And I think Drake is a great example of also someone that's put on a lot of people and given the platform, because I feel like, if you are a Drake and you've put Toronto on the map, that enough is collaboration, because that enough gives people platform to be like, oh, okay, we have someone coming out of here. Like, let me also show the world what I can do. It puts enough eyeballs on the city for you to have a chance that you would have otherwise had. And so I think collaboration is a big part of it. And I think in Vancouver, we're starting to see a lot of collaboration. And it's really super inspiring to me just to kind of see that.
Very true, very true. And I think it perfectly segues into the next question I want to ask, because even for all of you here, so we're always the ones taking risks, whether it be creating the content, trying to get live shows done, trying to get people in the right places and stuff like that. But do you think that it's also on the audience member to take that risk to interact with the things that we're trying to promote, whether it be shows or music or things like that?
I don't think so, really. I think people have such a choice. Nowadays, like I said, fighting for people's attention is hard. They have so much stimulation of any genre or format that they can take online. So I think it goes back to like a more basic concept, which is just building those grassroots fans that really are interested in you as a person, what you're doing. And if you're an artist that has even like 200 or 300 of these fans that are supporters and are willing to buy those hoodies and, shell out $10 for your album or the merch package, I think the people that have built those kind of fan bases are the ones that are still doing okay, because that core group of fan is willing. I don't think you're going to be able to keep those casual fans, and I don't think it's the responsibility of those casual fans to stick around, because why would they? So it all goes back to building like an organic grassroots, whatever you want to call it, following. Those are the only people I see doing really well during these times.
I mean, it's a two-way street, right? At the end, it's like I think after a while putting on shows, it's like you don't want just anybody coming to your show. Like, you want quality audience at your show. You want selective people that you want at your show that fits the context of the work that you're presenting. So it's not about just like cramming as many people or selling as many tickets, because that actually lowers the quality of the event that you're putting on if you have the wrong type of crowd at your show. So I think it's kind of like a two-way street, like you put up, like you get what you put out at the end of the day, so, if you want to run this like hyper capitalism like beast, and, you get, and you want to sell as many tickets, have many, and like have an only profit driven model, you're just going to get like a really shitty quality audience that's going to come to your show and not be very engaged and feel like and treat your art like it's disposable, and in those establishments as artists, you probably feel like you're disposable as artists too, because the next round of young new artists are going to come up and you're just going to be out. So that's why I think it's important to create to use this opportunity to create like a new model for music presentation and community engagement, because audience and cultural producers, we're both accountable to each other, and that's how we can produce work that is quality and that is safe, and that also represents a paradigm shift, which is like much needed.
I was going to say, totally going off what Auntie said, it's quality over quantity, and it's definitely a two-way street where if we create for the people attend, so we can keep on creating. And I think it's exactly that. You pan to the people you want to come, you get what you put out, and definitely quality over quantity every single time, because at that point the attendance or the audience becomes part of the experience as well. So if everyone's engaged and into it, then your experience has only been highlighted and bettered by the people.
Yeah, I think obviously we didn't have any artists on this panel for a reason, but I think a lot of artists would agree in saying that they would much rather have 50 really engaged people at a show than 200 who aren't paying attention and talking to each other while they're performing, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. The way I look at it, I think all of the responsibility falls on the people making the art. I don't think that anyone like the audience has a responsibility to do something, because the way I look at it, it's all about adding value, right? It's people come to shows because they get an experience. People listen to the music because they get an experience so they can connect with something. So it starts off with everyone that's making music, adding enough value, or, capturing the audience and putting out music that's undeniable, that really connects with people in a real way. Because I think my thoughts on it, it's like no one is owed support. I think that that's something that needs to be earned. I think support needs to be earned by making things that connect with people. And obviously that's a very, it's a very broad statement, but at least that's how I look at it, where it's none of the responsibilities on the audience, and it's all about the artists, their teams, the promoters, and whoever else, to really give people a reason to come out there or to support. And I think to an extent, Vancouver has a lot of dope venues, Fortune being one of them, a lot of dope promoters. And I've noticed over the last few years, there's more curation for an event, where it's like an event isn't just having a venue and playing music, but, you know, creating experiences or changing up the vibes or doing something that, you know, you'll remember. And it's not just like another night at that said venue. And so I think that's why people come out. And I think the more we start having like more curated type events, done by artists, done by people in Vancouver, you start bringing out more crowd. You start bringing out different types of crowds that might be interested.
An artist and an audience member have become totally different things, because your audience member now is also a creator.
Right.
In their own right. So our whole paradigm has shifted. And we are at this beautiful entry point now of, you know, we talk about machine learning and we talk about artificial intelligence and automation. And we're at a point where we can embrace that or we can push against it. But either way, we're going to have to find ways to transcend it and utilize what only we can do and go back to the music itself, because you can automate music now. You can, there's apps like HumTap and apps that will help you to make music without being a creator. What is it that differentiates you? And knowing that as an artist and watching the world change and how well we're going to be able to adapt is what's changed. And it's thrown us into disarray, but I think it's also given us the opportunity to evolve if we decide to take it.
Yeah. I think back in the day, music used to be the biggest thing for an artist that they had to focus on. And like you said, that is changing. It's not just about your music anymore. And it's the artist's responsibility and management surrounding them to really be eager and looking for those opportunities. One thing that frustrates me the most is seeing an artist that is turning down a small opportunity because they don't think it's worth their while. It's like, you don't get to do that right now. You know, you're not a Justin Bieber. You know, you have to put the work in and do these little things that will give you a follower or two. And like you said, like in the film industry, they're more willing to do that. And I would love to see small artists really doing that as well.
It's really funny you say that, because we were just going over the Fraser Valley Music Awards. And there's a bunch of artists we told who were fully eligible to apply who just didn't get around to doing it. And even on that note, like there's a bunch of, we're lucky in BC to have a pretty strong grant world, if you would.
Funding initiatives here.
Funding initiatives in general, right? But you see artists who, one, don't want to put in the time to do it, or two, find themselves in a way where they're very headstrong in the idea of making everything themselves or being like self-funded. I did everything by myself. I got here by myself. Without realizing a lot of those artists who you look to who also do that have done that with also additional funding. Even in Toronto, like there's the equivalent of Creative BC in Toronto as well. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, which also actually gives out as a percentage, I think, a little bit more than BC does.
You're talking about a funding body?
Yeah.
Factor?
No, it's not Factor.
Oh.
It's strictly to Ontario. I just can't remember the name of it anymore.
Oh, okay.
My apologies. But but even on that note, it's crazy because there's also this idea of, this is probably more skewed towards hip hop, but these artists who have brands who are more like close to the street, if you would, who see the idea of getting funding from somewhere else as being less street, and they don't want to have that attached to their name, like, oh, this video was funded by Factor, blah, blah, blah. And that's, I think, something that people still have trouble getting over now. But
I would say that, just to piggyback on what has been said, I would say that there needs to be a shift within the artists themselves to understand that, and exactly how you're saying about the acting, comparing the two, it's like, you have to understand that, like you have to know when music is going to become serious for you, or if it's forever going to be the thing you do in your bedroom. Because, like, and I feel like a lot of artists have the mindset that of like, since I'm making this music in my bedroom, it might never leave my bedroom. Sure, I might get a local gig here or a local show here, but it's like, they're not thinking about where this could take them 10 years, 5 years from now. I feel like that shift needs to be made in every artist that is really looking in the direction of music being, whether it be their career or their source of income, or their livelihood, exactly, because I feel like there's some really good artists that just haven't made that shift yet. And I feel like that's an important shift that I feel like every artist or every creative person needs to question within themselves if this is exactly what they want. Because sure, you could get your friends being like, oh, you're really good, blah, blah, but it's like you yourself have to have that sort of that will to be like, okay, I think that I'm good enough to take this beyond my bedroom, beyond the local gig, you know what I mean? So I feel like that shift needs to happen within artists locally.
Do you think that's like a generational thing?
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like
sure you could chalk it up to like millennials or whatever, but like I feel like it's like inner hunger.
Yeah,
I feel like it's an inner hunger.
I feel like the younger the artists that I work with, the more that's true. That's like, oh well, like I'm just doing this for fun, or you know, or whatever.
I think we have actually come full circle, because I think it goes down to having that community around you.
Yeah.
So like if an artist feels like they need to do something on their own and they don't really have that support, then they're less likely to reach out to that support too. So that's why it's really important to build and like surround these smaller artists with the resources and make sure that it's easily available for them to hear about and even like learn more about and get that help that will encourage them to take that next step. Because it is very daunting as an artist, you know, when you're going from just making music in your room and then moving forward into trying to make a living off of it. You're putting a lot on the table. So it's having that community to support you and give you the knowledge and resources, I think is so important.
It's definitely a scary step.
This is where I get on my ranting horse about career pathway visibility.
Yeah.
And I do agree with everything that has been said so far in this. And Steve, when you talked about it, I fully agree with you, but I also think that we lose so much, and Neha, to your point, we lose so much of our talent to thinking that their job ends after they've made the music,
right.
or in making the music only.
Yeah.
You know, so many times I've worked with people who have said, I just want to be an artist. And my response has been, okay, you know, that's great. And they say, but I don't want to do any of the business and I don't want to do any of the other thinking. I just want to sit at home and I want to make my art. And that's amazing. But it's like a dentist saying, I only want to extract molars. You don't get to choose which teeth you pull, guy. You have to understand that there is an entire mouth to deal with, and the anatomy, and the biology, and the paperwork that comes with being a dentist. So if you only want to be an artist in this day and age, then you have a very narrow concept of what being an artist today is. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to be an artist who is just writing songs? Because I also say be very careful what you wish for. Some people just want to write all day and they want everyone else to take care of everything else. You'll be told what your cut is. You'll be told what you have to write about. You'll be told how to dress. You'll be told how to live in every single way. Is that your idea of success? And the reality is that's sustainable to some people who cannot do any of those other things. And then you just hope that they do have a great team around them. But when it comes to career pathway visibility and artist empowerment and that community and creating those resources, we need to be responsible as community members to help other people understand that there are so many facets of this industry that can help you to become a better artist. And it's not a one-dimensional answer. Being an artist is not one-dimensional anymore. You've got to be a content creator. You've got to be, you've got to know how to publish your own work or start your own publishing company. And not always, but you have to know and you have to want to be a part of that.
Like, to put a bow on it, basically, I think that artists still, I shouldn't say artists in general, but a good portion of artists still don't understand all the other aspects besides the actual creation process of music. The business, the dealings, the promotion, the branding, any other sort of non-musical work is so out of their head because they're so in a mind state of making the best music they can.
Yeah, which is great. Do it. You should do it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying too. Like, I wouldn't want anybody to ever stop pursuing what they think is best for themselves in that moment.
Yeah.
But they have to realize there's all this other work that does need to get done if they want to make it, as we all said, your livelihood.
Yeah, and also understand what the opportunity cost is. So if you say to yourself, I am just going to be an artist, I'm just going to be a singer, then that's great. If an agent finds you and hires you and puts you on in a lounge to sing 5 nights a week, you've achieved your dream. Don't complain.
Yeah.
But if you want to do other things, like understand what you're giving up and what power you are letting go of when you make that choice. And you don't have to know how to do it all yourself, but you have to know how to speak that language to those people who can help you. Because otherwise you end up, I was in a publishing deal, none of those songs got released. That was 4 years of my life. I don't want for people to go through the same things. Yeah. And there was nothing malicious about it. It's just life. Yeah. It just happens, you know? So
you can have a team around you to help you, but at the end of the day, you need to understand what that team is doing.
Yes.
You can't just, let them do their thing while you sit there making music. Like, you need to have at least one ear to what's going on always. Because you'll get screwed over. People are going to screw you over. Or, things just might not work out the way you want it. But you need to have that attention and that knowledge to at least try to keep up.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that actually happens. People think it's like, when you sign a record deal, it's going to happen. No, it happens at every level.
But I really am starting to say to people that it's about the journey. And you need to be sustainable through your journey in order to be a thriving artist. Because otherwise, you're spending your time instead of investing it. And if you spend that time, you can't get it back. If you invest it in transferable skill sets, in understanding what your personal strengths are, in embracing the stepping stone jobs that you have to take that are hopefully within that same industry that strengthen and fortify your art and your ability to continue to create that art, then you've already succeeded. And every step of your way is a success. And you being in your bedroom might be the most successful for where you are at right now. And you might be more successful than that person who's given it all up and tried to do it full time and is now suffering mentally and physically and in so many other ways, so much that they stop making their art because then they have to survive. So learn how to thrive at this point and give yourself the best opportunity and understand that that bedroom is still a success. It's managing your own expectations a lot of the time, I think.
All right, so the next question is, do you think that there is, just based off like what we were just talking about too exactly, do you think that there is a lack of mutual knowledge and coordination between different cultural institutions? And does this lead to an impotence in the emergence of shared cultural identity of the city? I guess, Denise, if you don't mind taking that one, you were already talking a bit about it anyway.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I wrote a little something after I read the question too. So I was like, there has to be like stretching out to include others, like and a lot of collaboration is being stifled when the outer community doesn't feel that they're supported, including in on weekly or monthly events. Yeah, like I was like, my idea there was basically kind of what I said earlier, just like a lot of the same people are getting a lot of the grants, and I don't know why that is. Like, I do get it. Like, people know the people who are accepting or reading the grants. They're like, oh, okay, I know that person. I've been to their show, so I know what it is. Like, there's not really any back research done too, because like I was saying, just restructuring everything would help, because like putting an Indigenous person on the sound on board. Then more diverse shows would show up. So if like there were more Indigenous people on the Sound On, we'd see more Indigenous curation out of like some of the rounds. I watched the Native Pop Festival. That was really cool. I don't think that had anything to do with Sound On, so I'm happy that happened. I'm just saying that there should be more, because there are so many other artists. Like, even when I was watching the Indigenous Festival, there were a lot of artists that were missed in Vancouver that could have been on it, even though it was a 2-day festival. So, and then if Vancouver did just a focus on like, maybe if there's a Black History time, we could focus on some Black artists strictly in Vancouver. That would be amazing too. I'm always pushing for that. with my radio show, I'm always like I do an annual month for Black History Month where I'll focus on only Canadian artists. Like there's a spotlight, and people are able to find out some of those Black artists that are they aren't that known, and maybe they'll get a little bit more recognition when they have a platform to talk about their work.
Mm-hmm. I think Coots is about to say it too, but I just wanted to clarify. There actually is, Sound was still a thing. There was an Indigenous person on the board, and one person who was also mixed Indigenous. I think Coots wanted to say something on that note too.
Yeah, a little bit, man. I think anytime when the decision makers, the infrastructure is mostly one, race, then other minority groups or groups in general are going to feel less connected with it. So I think I mentioned this before, but I think the top needs to reflect the bottom and everything in between. It's no surprise Vancouver is very beautiful because it's so diverse, and we need that to reflect what our creative industry is. I definitely think it's majority white male, and that needs to change.
Well, and like we said before, you have to make it economically feasible to garner their attention. You can't expect them to pay attention to you if you don't have the draw. It's the same thing with labels now. Labels don't want to talk to you if they can't see your monthly listeners and see your engagement and see your statistics. No one wants to build anything from scratch anymore. So you've got to get it up and running up to a certain point where you can even have any expectation that commercial entities are going to have an interest in you anyways.
I think adding to what just said, that I don't think there needs to be a bridge, but I can tell you most of those larger like promotional groups don't really know what's happening a lot of the time, because it's not really part of the bottom line. Part of their bottom line / a part of the regular revenue sources. Like the people running a lot of club nights, besides probably the best examples of fortunate celebrities, don't really care about what's happening in terms of local music, frankly. I don't think there really needs to be a bridge. There just needs to be an expansion of, again, these groups like Chaos, the oppositions, etc., to have those continue to grow, rather than needing to go seek like additional funding or whatever else you from these other groups. Especially when you have access to SoCan, Music BC, Factor, etc., right?
For sure. I think honestly we'll just keep this going, because I think everything you guys are saying is exactly on point, and it's all correct. And clearly, like you guys have all said, there's clearly like a disconnect between like the bigger organizations and the people on like the ground level and the people doing the work that we're doing. But like, do you guys think that if the opportunity arises to be placed in positions in the bigger companies, would you take that position, or would you continue doing what you're doing now and then let that be the change, or would you want to be put in a position in a bigger company to make the change?
One thing I always say is those people that are the bigger platforms, they were grassroots at one period of time, and through doing it their own way, created different experiences and different values to become who they are today. And I think that the future bigger players need to be born and need to kind of carve out their own lane. But it's a mix, right? Everyone has different goals. Everyone has different perspectives. That's just kind of how I look at it. I tend to be more like, start small and figure it out, because there's no other way to become that by just doing it.
And some smart, some strategic partnerships along the way are probably going to be key to that. You might need to work with a blueprint to get the venues that you need and to get access to certain things. So I think at the very least, it's probably going to be a bit of A and a bit of B anyways.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, like on a personal level, because there was this whole idea of not wanting to be commercial, to put simply. But we got to a point where we realized we need commercial partners to get certain access to have certain doors that are opened that might have taken that much more effort if we didn't partner with these brands. And especially with groups like locally, you look at Broadband TV / Opposition, you look at Brody with his attachment to Lyrical Lemonade, things like that. Like, I definitely think, like you said, strategic partnerships are the best way to move about in growing your brand / identity than going to work for another brand, I think. Because the minute you work for one, you also have less free control and less ability to basically throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks, right? You can't really do that with a commercial brand. With us, like, shit, we did a party in a house. Like how many times? Like 3-4 times I found out that it actually works decently well, even money-wise. And then we did our most commercial party inside the club, and we're like, that works too, right? You couldn't really do both if I worked for a Blueprint as an example, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to answer within reference just to like myself and like my personal career, because obviously I'm really invested in growing opposition, and I'm nowhere near done that, so it's not something I'd want to like abandon. Like I want to see that and continue to grow that, and ideally get to a point where I'm not really as needed as much, and then maybe at that time I would look at something else. But I have when I'm older, I've always kind of dreamed of working at a bigger company. Like maybe it's a company that I currently hate right now, or not hate, but don't like the way it's structured, and kind of helping change things from within, because I think that's where you can have like the biggest impact. But that's also, it's tough because it's also like can be a struggle. Like that company also has to be invested in doing change as well. It doesn't come down to just an employee. It's really about like the company's vision and direction. But, so yeah, it's a little tricky to answer, but I think I would definitely just want to be involved and work with these companies more, and like help make those changes that need to be done.
I mean, as long as it weren't like conflict of interest, I'd do it all. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, I don't think anyone who's managing an artist or works at a record label should be doing anything with grants or anything like that. But there's other roles, there's other roles that some of these companies should make. And if it weren't conflict of interest, then yeah, I'd do it all.
I think that's also part of the problem too. Like people like us, we like, you can kind of tell when you talk to someone too, even if it's just for as long as we have been, like obviously I know Johnny a lot better, but you can already tell where their heart is in it, if more for the music and more for the artist. And typically when that happens, you usually end up in like a management role or something to support the artists, or like a label role. But I feel like a lot of these people, and I can't like blanket say to everyone, but a lot of these people who work at maybe, the major labels, the Spotifys and stuff, to some degree, like just the bigger companies and the government companies, they are more so looking at it as a job instead of like their life. I feel like that's a really big disconnect when you more so just look at a job and just your career and just like a 9 to 5. You don't really create change. You kind of just keep things as is, because I don't want to blame any of these people for the problems that exist today. It's more so it's deeply rooted in what's been created for these bigger companies and also the countries as a whole.
Like what Shane, what you touched on there is kind of the key point, is that at the end of the day, these are still jobs for these people to to support the scene / the artists around it and within it. So I think the bigger issue is that, like you said, people like who are on this panel, besides the organizations themselves, don't really see themselves on these panels because, one, it's a conflict of interest. Two, they want a much more hands-on approach to the people they work with and see the tangible difference that they can make in these artists' careers / developments, right? And I think this also adds on to what Johnny says, is that it would be a deep conflict of interest. Like, for speaking personally here, like for us, we've had multiple people ask us like, hey, do you want to manage us? And I'm like, the minute I do that, it means the other people who I work with are going to now look to me and be like, hey, how come this artist got this slot or this deal and I didn't, and I need to work with them still, right? So there's that issue too, and that carries over to these government-backed organizations where you do see these network / relationships that are more closely together, like the one I mentioned earlier, then of course they're going to get more money. Of course they're going to have more access and more eyes to these problems. And I think like there's no easy solution. It's really just both of what you said, is that there needs to be new roles to, like, not to sound woke, but to diversify and also have a better outlook on what's actually making a difference in Vancouver, especially genre-wise and music-wise.
Yeah, I feel like if you really want to make change, you have to kind of dedicate your life to it, your passion to it. You have to have like a strong passion and really care about the music and the artists. Otherwise, you're just going to be another pawn in the game, I feel like.
In the evening, baby, please don't leave. When the leaves turn green, in the season free, in the eve she's Eve. Don't you give this away, ay. What do I have to say, ay?